Using a grid to draw from a photo. In this video, I'll explain how to create a grid on top of a photograph that then you can use to help draw on your drawing paper. You're going to need a pen and a pencil, drawing paper, your photograph, and a little extra sheet of paper to do some math, and also a ruler. The first thing we have to do is make sure that the proportion of our picture and our paper are the same, meaning that the height and width don't have to be the same exact length, but they need to be the same proportions to each other. So we're going to measure both the photograph and the paper to see how big each is first. So after measuring my photograph, I know that it is 6 inches wide and 8.5 inches tall, and I already know that the size of my drawing paper is 9 by 12. After writing those fractions down, 6 over 8.5 and 9 over 12, I'm going to find the highest common denominator, if we remember that term from division. If I divide 9 by 12 by 4, I can get down to the fraction 3/4, which means that's the proportion I need my photograph to be as well. So for 6 over 8.5 to be 3 over 4, I need to make that 8.5 length a little bit shorter. So because 6 over 8 is the same as 3 over 4, which is the same as 9 over 12, a little math for you in your art class today. We're going to cut a 1/2 inch off the bottom of our photograph. I'm going to decide to cut it off the bottom because it's more boring. I think it's helpful to kind of scribble around the border that you've cropped so you remember not to go past that part of the photograph. Even though we cropped it, sometimes we forget and we end up going to the printed photograph. So I scribble it out just for my own sanity. So now that is 6 inches by 8 inches, which is the same proportions as my drawing paper. So I am ready to create my grid. Now I'm going to show you how to do a grid based on diagonals. In the past in art class you might have done a grid based on squares, but this one's based on triangles. The first step is to make a straight line from opposite corners. So you're going to go from the bottom left corner to the top right corner. Take time lining your ruler up, and with your pen make a line across your photograph. Use pins on the picture because it's much easier to see. Now when you're doing this, I want you to make sure that you're doing it to the edge of the cropped photo, not the whole printed out picture if it wasn't the same proportions. Make sure we're laying out our grid correctly. After you connect opposite corners, you're going to go through that middle intersection in a straight vertical line. Now you do have to kind of be really careful here and use your eye and make sure that that line is straight vertical, not diagonal, not crooked at all, or else it'll throw off your whole grid. We're going to do the same through that middle intersection except horizontally. So now we have 4 rectangles on my photograph that are each divided into 2 triangles. Within those 4 smaller rectangles, I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to connect the diagonals and then draw verticals through the intersections. Now that's a good start for a grid, but the great thing about this grid is you can make it more complicated for your more detailed areas of your photograph, and you can leave it simple where there's nothing complicated in the photo to draw. So if you're struggling more, you can add more to your grid and help give yourself more guidelines. So over her face, I'm going to go ahead and add another set of diagonals and triangles so I have more guidelines directly on her face, especially the eyes, nose, mouth area. Once we have our grid laid out on our photograph, we're ready to draw the exact same grid on our drawing paper. Now we're going to use our pencil obviously for this part, and I'm going to draw my grid darker so you guys can see it watching the video, but there's no reason you should push hard with your pencil. You should draw these grids very lightly so they're easy to erase, so you can see them from while you're working, but you cannot see them from 5 feet away. I'm going to go ahead and speed this clip up till we get our grid matched. Now that I've got a grid on my drawing that matches the grid that's on my photograph, I'm ready to start transferring over the image. Now I'm going to use the guidelines that I've created in the grid to help draw this face. I'm going to start with some big bold lines, some edges that are easier and simple. Just this kind of curved edge on the left side of her forehead is a good place to start. I can see that her part lines up exactly with that center vertical line on my grid, so that's a helpful guideline. I can see that the hair kind of comes through those far triangles just a little bit, not too much. Down about halfway through that section, a little more is the top of the ear. That I made way too small, but don't worry, I bet I fix it later. So being able to use the guidelines within this drawing helps get the drawing photo accurate. If it's not the same as it is on the photo, then you should erase and keep adjusting on your picture. This should hopefully give you a good idea on how to use the grid while you're drawing. Hopefully this video has explained thoroughly how to create these diagonal grids, and if you still need help, please email me with any questions.